So we are now recording, so good afternoon, well, for me anyway. Welcome everyone, irrespective of where you are time zone wise. Happy Monday. As well, I think it might be Memorial Day in the States, which I completely overlooked. So if it is, there you are. Anyway, welcome to the call. As hopefully you're all aware, the main focus of our call this week is to listen to Andrey Meshkov, who's kindly agreed to join us from AdGuard to talk about DNS-over-QUIC in the wild, as I titled it. So whatever you choose to share with us, Andrey, in terms of your experiences from running a QUIC or DoQ resolver for probably about 18 months plus now.
Yep.
And DoQ clients for probably even longer than that, I guess. So given that the standard was only ratified properly about 2 weeks ago in terms of the RFC being published by the IETF, so RFC 9250, I think. And I'm sure if I'm wrong, Sarah, amongst others, will correct me in the chat. So this is particularly topical to follow on so swiftly on the heels of the standard coming out. So with that in mind, over to you, Andrey. So take us through your material. Anyone got any questions? Use the Zoom facility to raise your virtual hand or put a question in the chat. And when we get to the end of Andrey's presentation, we'll do a Q&A. And if there's anything in the chat, I'll read it out if people aren't in a position to speak. So without further ado, Andrey, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Let's start then. Let me introduce myself quick. I will try to be quick. So my name is Andrey and I'm a CTO of AdGuard. And about 18 months ago, we launched the first ever public DNS-over-QUIC resolver. And today I would like to tell you a little bit about our experience with it and so far. But first, let me please start with a very short introduction of what we do and where DNS-over-QUIC was deployed and what DNS-over-QUIC is. AdGuard is a popular content blocking tool, and besides that, we make a lot of DNS-based products. So it's AdGuard DNS, a public stub resolver with a focus on content blocking. AdGuard Home, this is a personal DNS server with advanced content blocking capabilities, and AdGuard apps that provide DNS filtering and encryption capabilities. That includes DNS-over-QUIC as well. So, as I said earlier, AdGuard DNS is a rather popular public DNS resolver, and so that you could so that you understand what it is, what's the load, and what kind of encryption protocols we deal with. These are the current stats. So currently we process about 1 million requests per second. Most of it comes from DNS over TLS, and DNS over QUIC is just 1%. And well, let me first defend myself a little bit. So why not mostly DNS over QUIC? Because well, it wasn't standardized until like 2 weeks ago, and there were some changes to the draft. So at some point, a 2-byte prefix, for instance, was introduced, and well, we feared that there might be more changes. So well, we were waiting, and we were using DNS over HTTPS as a default for the time being. But since now the RFC is finally published, we'll consider making it the default option from now on, because well, there are more advantages than disadvantages. And one more point about DNS over TLS, because you can see that it is by far the most popular protocol on our resolver. This is because of Android devices. So people love to stack our DNS server in the Android settings, and because of that, we have like a lot of DNS over TLS traffic. Do you hear me?
Yep, you're loud and clear.
Okay. So a little bit more about QUIC itself. So what is QUIC? Basically, QUIC is like reinventing TCP, but well, now it works over UDP and has some cool stuff built inside. First of all, the encryption is built in. You cannot have a plain QUIC connection. There will always be a crypto handshake. There will always be a TLS encryption. But on the other hand, this TLS handshake will be faster than the regular TCP plus TLS. And on top of it, QUIC uses stream-based multiplexing, which also helps solve the head-of-line blocking issue that all the TCP-based protocols suffer from. And finally, QUIC spec allows the so-called connection migration thing, which means that the client's IP address can change with no need to reconnect. And we would love to use it if there was any a real implementation of it. Unfortunately, there is none, and well, we only have connection migration in theory. And quickly about these things. So I believe that most of you are well know a little bit about QUIC, so we can skip a couple of slides, but just in case, faster handshake. It's simple. This is because in case of QUIC, the crypto handshake and the connection handshake are combined into a single handshake. So we have 3 packets instead of 6. And we have a faster handshake because of that. But again, this is theory. On practice, QUIC may also include a so-called source address validation step. So the need for this step is because the server needs some way to protect against amplification attacks. So the server would like to verify that the source IP address was not spoofed, and because of that, it very often happens that the server sends some kind of a small retry packets in response, and the client needs to echo it back, and only after that the handshake continues. So there will be actually 5 packets, not 3 packets in most of the cases. Depends on the server implementation though. So if the server is like smart enough, it will remember that this client well is good enough and will not send the retry packet every time. Then regarding solving the head-of-line problem, the problem itself is rather simple. So in case of a TCP connection, if there's some packet loss, regardless of what protocol you use, everything will stop until the server or the client receive the retransmitted packet. In case of DNS-over-QUIC, fortunately, we have different streams, and each stream is a single DNS query response exchange. And if any query is lost, all other streams continue to work. And so they do not cause one single packet loss will not cause other streams to stall and wait until the packet is retransmitted. And finally, connection migration is a nice thing that allows client to change IP address, but well, in the real life, it doesn't happen and doesn't exist, unfortunately. Maybe in the future it will, and I really hope it will, because well, this would be very great, especially for mobile, and most of our DNS users are on mobile. And quickly, let's compare DNS-over-QUIC to plain DNS, just to see why we need it. And first and foremost, it's encrypted. But that's not the only advantage from the DNS point of view. The second important advantage is that QUIC, despite being a UDP-based protocol, it does not limit the message size. So you're not limited by MTU anymore, and you don't need anymore to truncate and fall back to TCP and do all this ugly stuff. And finally, there's built-in protection against amplification attacks, which I was talking just on the previous slide. Finally, I swear this is the last introduction slide. We should talk about comparing DNS over QUIC to DNS over HTTP3, since HTTP3 is also based on QUIC. So DoQ clients will be upgraded to QUIC naturally when HTTP3 is fully supported and standardized. But on one hand, it makes some sense. But on the other hand, I don't really see HTTP providing any advantage to DNS, and it seems like simply like a dead weight. So if we compare DNS over QUIC to DoQ3, both use QUIC as a transport protocol. HTTP3 adds HTTP headers on top of it, which means it sends and receives HTTP headers alongside every DNS query. And protocol-wise, it adds no value. The only maybe feasible thing that I heard is that you can benefit from HTTP caching mechanism, but well, I never seen any real-life example that proves that this really helps. That this should replace the standard DNS cache, and well, and that's basically the only argument for HTTP. And besides the overhead of carrying these HTTP headers, it also adds more data points that in theory could be used for fingerprinting clients. The cache itself, the E tags maybe could be used for doing that. And again, why would you need to make the the attack surface bigger when you can simply avoid it with QUIC? So well, the only real benefit of DoQ3 is that the existing DoQ clients will get its support naturally, like with little effort. This is kind of it. Well, no other advantages that I can see there. And finally to the topics, to our experience with DNS over QUIC, and I would like to highlight like 3 points. 3 insights. I will talk in detail a little bit later. Here are the points themselves. So the first point is that DNS over QUIC connections seem to be more stable and long-living compared to DoQ and DNS over TLS. The second point is that DNS over QUIC overall is heavier on CPU than DNS over TLS, but it's pretty much the same as DoQ. And finally, the third point is that clients seem to be more snappy with DNS over QUIC, but mostly because of the faster handshake. So on mobile, this is rather important because network changes happen very quickly, and the speed of the reconnection, it is visible. You can sense it. So finally, to the first point regarding the connection being more stable. Here's how we measured it. We have a Prometheus metric with the number of TLS handshakes per protocol. Plus, we have a Prometheus metric with the number of processed queries. So dividing one on another, we can see that a different number of queries are processed through a connection depending on the protocol. First, we see that about 9 queries is processed through an average DNS over TLS connection. But it's important to mention here that most of the DNS over TLS clients are Androids with Google's native DNS over TLS implementation. And this implementation has a very strict idle timeout. The connection will be closed if there were no queries processed through it in 7 seconds, which kind of explains why the connection tend to be closed rather often. With DNS over HTTPS, most of the clients are either AdGuard apps or browsers, so we can be sure that the idle timeout is not that strict. And we can see that on average about 14 queries are processed through a single DNS over HTTPS connection. Finally, with DNS over QUIC, we see that there are over 30 queries per average QUIC connection. So we save on handshakes, which is a good thing because handshake is like the heaviest operation. But to be honest, it is rather hard to explain why this happens. So why the difference is that large. I am yet to figure it out, but that's what we see on the production servers. Now to the second point, to CPU usage. We try to measure how heavy is QUIC on CPU. But since a single AdGuard server responds to all kinds of protocols, comparing QUIC to others requires some tricks. So here's what we did. Processing a single DNS query involves using different code in AdGuard DNS. Some of the code is related to the crypto protocol itself, and some of the code is related to AdGuard DNS internal logic. For instance, packing and unpacking DNS messages, DNS cache, the content block in itself, all this stuff. And this AdGuard specific part is the same for all protocols. So we can use it as a base value and see how much overhead each crypto protocol creates. So we did some profiling and got some results. Let's take a look. First, we will take a look at DNS over TLS. So here's a flame graph. Hopefully you know how to read it, but anyway, I will try to explain. It should be read from top to bottom. And let's take a look at the example. So the first column serve TCP con function, which in turn calls read TCP message and calls another, and finally calls TLS read TLS read function. And most of the time that is spent by serve TCP con, it comes from actually from using TLS, read function, and that's how we can understand which part of the processing belongs to the crypto protocol itself, to DNS, to TLS, and which part is actually AdGuard specific part, which is the same for all protocols. And well, the purple columns is the functions that are related to TLS. Everything else is AdGuard specific. And so according to this graph, about 40% of the time was spent in TLS functions. So, well, we have our base. We can now compare it to other protocols. And the second one is DNS over HTTPS. And you can see that the purple part is wider. And well, according to this graph, HTTP specific stuff took about 60% of the time. So it's like 1.5 times more heavy on CPU than DNS over TLS. And doing the same trick to DNS over QUIC, we again see that the purple columns take about 60%. So we can, well, make a conclusion that DNS over QUIC is pretty much the same of this as heavy as DNS over HTTPS on CPU. So, well, what's important to note here is that it doesn't mean that a single query will be slower. What it means is that your server load would be a bit higher if you run DNS over QUIC or DoQ compared to DNS over TLS. But from the client's perspective, the protocol benefits may be more important than the increased server load. For instance, with QUIC, we have faster handshakes, and this is more important to clients than how much CPU time we spend on our servers. Well, by the way, just to explain why a single query wouldn't be slower, most of these things, these are asynchronous operations. They do not like slow down the whole processing thing. So, well, and this is true for both DNS over QUIC and DNS over HTTPS. Most of the stuff that you see on the flame graphs are asynchronous. Finally, about implementations, what changed, and one thing changed. We no more use core DNS, so there is still the our old implementation you can use, but it only implements rather old DNS over QUIC draft, and it is not compatible with the RFC standard. So I wouldn't encourage you to use it. On the other hand, we're going to open source our new code. So we decided to get rid of core DNS and implement it from scratch. And the whole AdGuard DNS will be licensed under a restrictive license under AGPL, but the part that implements pure DNS server with DNS over QUIC support, it will be moved to a separate library with the permissive license. And well, if you decide to use Go, I would encourage you to try it, since it is probably the best stub resolver implementation available in this language. At least I want to believe it. And we still provide some other implementations. So DNS proxy, also a good implementation for both the client and the server. You can use it actually both ways. AdGuard Home is based on DNS proxy, so it still supports QUIC. Again, it could be a QUIC DNS over QUIC client or a DNS over QUIC server. Depends on how you would like to use it. And well, the same implementations as I presented last time. The same client implementations, we still support them. And well, to use it, please use it. If you decide to implement DNS over QUIC yourself, a couple of comments, because we tried all these major libraries. For Go, there's not many different libraries. There's only QUIC Go. It is rather stable, and well, it became better with time. A lot of issues were resolved. So I can recommend it, and it is pretty good actually. For C++, there's ngTCP2, which we also use, and you can look at our DNS slips library as a reference. And for us, there's Cloudflare's Cache, which is also a solid choice. We were using it in a different product. We didn't yet do anything with DNS, so we used it for our VPN service, but still it proved to be stable and well, a good choice if you decide to implement it in Rust. This is kind of it. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrey. That was very helpful. There's two questions in the chat, and then I'll see if anyone else wants to come in. So in the order that they will put in, Kurt has asked, is the DNS transport decided within the plugin, the browser, or on the operating system level? I would assume that you control DNS requests to your site.
It depends. So you see, it depends on the client. If this is Android with Google's like native DNS over TLS support, it is on the operation system level. If this is our apps, then this is, well, here's how the apps work. Like they run some kind of a local VPN tunnel, so they proxy all the DNS traffic through them, but let all the other traffic go go around the tunnel. So only the DNS traffic is routed into the app, and then the app uses one of our client implementations. Most by default, this isn't currently DNS over HTTPS, but well, in the future, it probably will be DNS over QUIC. Hopefully this answers the question.
Okay, thank you. Kurt will come back in if not.
The user can choose it in, excuse me, I think that this is a follow-up. The user can choose the protocol in the app settings. But yeah, you're right that most of the users are not interested in choosing it, and then they just use the protocol that we decide to be the default.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then you'll see John has asked, were the flame graphs examining a single standalone query, including setup, or was it an average, or a single pipeline query after setup had been established?
The flame graphs weren't examining a single standalone query. It was a flame graph from one of the production servers. So there are, well, they include a lot of queries. And I just tried to grab the parts that are related to one of the protocols and, well, do some magic to assume what is the overhead of each crypto protocol.
Right. I'm sure John will come back in if he's got any follow-up. But can I ask if people want to raise their virtual hands or put more questions?
There's another question from Sarah. With your implementation, what % of the time are clients able to achieve 0 RTT handshakes? Yeah. Hi, first of all, hi, Sarah. And it depends on the implementation. So and mostly, and in our case, it depends on the server implementation. And until recently, QUIC Go didn't even allow to avoid sending the retry token. And the option to do that, it only appeared in one of the newest version of QUIC Go, but we haven't yet experimented with that because experimenting with that will mean that we need to come up with some smart logic that remembers which client we handshaked before, and etc., and we just didn't have time to do that. So currently with our server, 100% time, this is not 0 RTT.
I suppose it is still leading edge, though, to be fair, Andrey. So maybe an exercise for the future to optimize.
Of course.
Yeah. Mike, I see you've raised your virtual hand. So do you want to come in with a question?
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Andrey, for the great presentation. I was really looking forward for your presentation as we had a look in a recent paper also on DNS over QUIC and also your infrastructure. And I was wondering, when we researched and developed the tooling for our paper, we found that we get an address validation token using the retry mechanism, as you explained at the start of your presentation. But then we find something odd when we try to reuse this token but came from another source port. Then we get another address validation token. And we could work around this issue by using the same source port over and over again. And I was wondering if this is intended, or maybe there's something related to QUIC Go, but this essentially means that this adds another round trip every time you change the source port.
Yeah. This is definitely not intended, and this is 100% related to QUIC Go. And I wonder, I read your paper, by the way, just recently, very nice paper. I just wanted to ask, when exactly did you research it? Because there were a couple of major changes on the server side, and QUIC Go is not as stable as you would like it to be. So I'm not sure if this behavior is still a thing, but it makes sense to check it again. And this is related to QUIC Go 100%.
Okay, so for the context, our measurements were from January this year, but in April, we performed the measurements again and did also find this issue still there. Yeah, okay.
Would be great if you could send me some details, maybe to the email, for instance, am@adguard.com, just to double check.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Mike. Peter, you got your hand raised.
Thanks. Andrey, thank you very much for the presentation. It was super interesting. And the flame graph in particular was really, really interesting to look at. But I wanted to mention one thing. I think the DNS over HTTP3, some people might say that there's a privacy benefit there, but I don't agree, but I think that might be one of the arguments for it. But my question was going to be about the connection migration. So you said that it's not actually being used or at all.
The problem with the connection migration is that there is no implementation. No one still implemented it. Even Cloudflare didn't do it.
Oh, okay. So I was curious about the motivation for it being added to the protocol in the first place, whether it was trying to solve a real world need that, or if it was a kind of, this would be nice to have, a kind of cool thing to have. Do you know?
Could you please come again, because something wrong occurred to my headphones.
Do you know the motivation for adding connection migration to the protocol?
Oh, the motivation is obvious, because this is like the coolest thing ever.
Perhaps motivation is well, yeah, it being cool it seems. Okay, fair enough. No. The motivation is simple, because on mobile, network changes happen a lot, and you want to continue to use use the connection to download something, for instance, or even when you go into the elevator and then come back from it. The idea is cool. There are similar implementations in other protocols. WireGuard, for instance, it supports some kind of a connection migration as well. QUIC is a more more wide thing than WireGuard. But unfortunately, no connection migration for us yet.
I see that one of the co-authors of the DoQ standard has elaborated on because it's cool to say because they could.
Because they could. Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. I don't think, by the way, that this is a good vector for user tracking. The connection ID, because it is actually a little bit more complicated than just assigning an identifier to a single connection. There are like many different identifiers, and the client may use one of them, and some more complicated crypto stuff that's going on to prevent user tracking. So it's not that easy to track. So, well, don't be afraid of that. Don't block QUIC, please.
Okay, that was a good question. Anyone else got any questions for Andrey on DoQ? Give you a chance to think if you do. Right, I'm not seeing anything in the chat, not seeing any hands raised, so I assume not for the moment. Are you happy to share your slides, Andrey?
Of course. I will share. Well, I can share it right now. Just a moment.
Okay, or ping them to me and I'll share them.
Yeah. I will send it to you then. Well, you can share it with others.
Okay, that's really good. Thank you, and I appreciate taking the time to run through that. This is all good, sort of hard-earned experience, and I know others will benefit from. So that's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Let me just quickly cover a couple other points whilst we're all together. So just bear with me whilst I share my screen. Okay, so just running through a few other things, just quickly signpost for you some of the news from this week, all of which is in the weekly news headlines email. But you'll see in there there's some additional details from Microsoft about their Azure DNS private resolver service, which the first information came out, I think, last week, if I remember rightly. So some more detail to sort of flesh that out a little. Also, ironically, as Peter's on the call, Peter has put together a piece on sort of defining DNS abuse, an ever-present topic, certainly at ICANN and various other venues. So that's well worth a read. And equally topically, I see that AdGuard I've got a sort of private DNS software that's sort of beta 3 with additional features that's come out. So that will be particularly topical given Andrey's sort of talk just now, and I can say that as a user of the AdGuard blocker, just by the by. And then finally, ITF 114, just a reminder that we're in the last week for early bird registrations, runs out at 23:59 UTC next Monday the 6th. After which it goes, for in-person attendance, it goes from $700 to $875. So it's quite a big bump if you don't register, if you are attending in person in Philadelphia. So worth doing in the next week if you're intending going. A few forthcoming events, sort of various ones coming up. I'll just again signpost a couple. One that I've added in the last week, which I picked up, Mozilla have got a meetup on 9th of June. You'll see on the building blocks for a trusted internet, which could be quite interesting. So if your diary permits and it's of interest to you, that could be well worth attending. And then later in June, the UK's Competition and Markets Authority is holding an event over a day and a half on data technology and analytics. But it's a hybrid event, both in person in London and online, with quite an interesting cross-section of speakers. I know Vittorio is down to participate in a panel, as of various others. And then finally, at the end of June, just a reminder that Eurodig is coming up with a slightly different structure this year compared to the last few years. So that's worth a look if you've not had a chance to look at the agenda for that. The other thing I mentioned, talking. Oh, okay. So see, Simon hasn't seen the. Oh, I don't think there's an early bird for day rates, but certainly for the week, the weekly registration, as I say, in person is $700 at the moment. It goes up to $875. I think after the 6th, and then it goes up again. I think it's to $1,000 if you're a late registrant. Again, that's for in person. I think the remote rates also go up, but they're not as expensive to start with. So the difference.
It was just for the full week rate. So Andrew, it wasn't for any of the other rates. Although of course I guess most people on this call are interested in the full week rates anyway. But
yeah, it's a fair point though. Yeah, I think with the day rates you just pick which day you want to go and that's it. As opposed to the weekly rate. Yeah, good point. I thought about that. Just whilst I think of it, the other thing I mentioned, although it was last week, I thought the DNS filter event last week, Peter, was good, and dare I say it, in particular the panel discussion on cybersecurity and state actors. I can't remember the exact title, but you have some very good panel members.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, actually, it was my first time ever moderating something like that, and I really enjoyed it. It was protecting your organization against nation-state actors, and there were some really good people on there who genuinely, Ben April from Domain Tools, Matt Lee from Pax8, and John DiMaggio from Authenticate One, Auth One. God, I've forgotten the company, but they were really smart guys, and there's going to be a recording put up. So if anybody's interested, it was a 40-minute session. Thank you.
Again, in the weekly sort of headlines, you'll see that there is a link to the YouTube recording included. You'll be pleased to know.
Thank you very much.
For the whole day, to be fair, but it does include that session. Okay, then last thing from me, then I'll just check if anyone's got anything else you want to raise. Just a reminder, next week we're changing the start time to 1800 UTC. We've got a session with Jeff Huston, I think chief scientist from AppNec, talking about the path to resolveless DNS. Change of time, for those of you who aren't aware, Jeff is based in Canberra, and that's still pretty early for him. I think that's something like 4 a.m., 4 or 5 a.m., something like that. So he's kindly agreed to make an early start. I was trying to pick a time which worked just about for people in Europe and also in North America. So a bit late for those of us in Europe, but it's sort of just about doable for Jeff as well. So hopefully that will work for some of you. And then the following week, back at our normal time, we got Steve Stadden from DNS Filter talking about protective DNS, DNS encryption, and zero trust. Just picking up, I think, on the guidance from the NSA that was published, if I remember right, I think it was last year. So I'll give his take on that for your information. And then in terms of future topics, you'll see I've put in a few suggested sort of panel discussions that I'm interested in doing. One is really just to reprise the discussion that we did a few weeks ago, but with some additional participants, because not everyone could make that session. So that's just a panel discussion on learnings from the deployment and scaling of encrypted DNS. So I'm hoping to get a couple more resolver operators, plus ideally maybe a couple of the software companies involved as well to share their thoughts. And then going to look to do a second sort of panel discussion, but on resolver discovery, just looking at give an update on how things are progressing with DNR, DDR, etc. So I'll look to involve some of the authors of some of those drafts, if possible, and a few other interested people. So if you want to take part in either of those panels, just get in touch with me directly, and I'll put more details, including dates, as they firm up. And that's everything from me. So I'll stop sharing and see, does anyone have anything else that you want to bring up this week? And if so, either put it in the chat or just sort of raise your hand, virtual hand that is, or just chime in. So I'll just pause and see if anyone does. I'm seeing no raised hands. I don't see anything in the chat. So I'm assuming not. So on that note then, we're just slightly before the hour, so a few minutes back for your respective days. So I hope that was useful. Thank you, Andrey in particular, for sort of taking us through your experiences, which I think were extremely valuable. So really appreciate that. I know you've had a sort of busy time of it of late with more than a few operational challenges. So it's very much appreciated making the time to do this as well. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a fantastic week and look forward to sort of seeing you slightly later time next week in conversation with Jeff Huston. So have a great week. See you all then. Thanks all.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Andy.
Andrew.
Andrey.
Thanks, Andrey. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.